Hello, this is Inside News. I'm Dale Matthews, and as always, I'm joined by Mike Jones. Hello, Mike.
Good evening, Dale.
So this is our 303rd night in a row, 7 nights a week. We do this show every night at 7 o'clock here in Southern Oregon. And the reason that we started doing this on our website called Bad County, it's kind of a tart title, we know, is that for generations, here in our part of the world, this place that we live in, we don't have any television stations here. It's because of the geography. And so we have to depend on things like satellite or maybe cable to get television stations in here from a neighboring county. We've got a couple of radio stations. The radio stations are generally, as far as news goes, for example, following what's happening with county commissioners, the radio stations have generally said, and sometimes quite specifically, we don't want to hear about that. We don't want to hear about that. Nope. Nope, don't want to, but we've got tape where there's, nope, don't want to hear it, just don't want to hear it. They do a wonderful job in things like Bargain Roundup, but they don't want to hear this part of the news. For quite a while now, we've had a newspaper in this area. It makes it sound kind of impoverished, a newspaper, but we've got a newspaper that has simply refused to write certain articles. I mean, if it's something critical of county government, they're not interested. They just don't want to run it. And it doesn't mean you have to be some kind of crazy person that's complaining about everything. But when there's a cost overrun of $100,000 and nobody wants to write about it or talk about it, that just seems to me to be a little bit strange. So what we've been doing over a period of time is that when we see something that looks like it may be improper, for example, county commissioners meeting in a parking lot of that same radio station and taking a vote out of presence of the people. Really, that can't be legal, can it? And we get asked questions every once in a while. Can you guys explain? It would be nice to be able to explain, but when we go to the state hierarchy and say, listen, it's doing us no good to complain, because they just say, go complain to the state, and they laugh. And so we started shooting videotape of these things and providing them to the state. They just, well, yeah, that's probably not legal. Probably, yeah, well, yeah, not legal. Okay, what can we do about this? Well, you can elect different people next time. Hey, this is part of your job. No, that wasn't working. So there's an outfit called the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, OGEC. And the Government Ethics Commission, what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to listen to people who tell them that things aren't turning out quite right, and then maybe at least send a letter of education to the county commissioners, our equivalent of the county supervisors down in California, and tell them how the law works. Well, as came up recently, one of the county commissioners said, I know we're breaking a law, and I don't care. What do you do about that? Or we had another commissioner before that said, it's none of your business what we do as commissioners. Really, it's none of your business what we do as commissioners. So we make it our business. And we try to follow through on this, and we've been filing complaints with reams of evidence, and we've gotten nowhere. Well, you know what's happened in our state recently. The governor got in some kind of trouble, and the same group that's been ignoring us, the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, was tapped to look into the governor, and the governor eventually resigned because they found that he was not doing things right. It brought a lot of attention to OGEC. Now we're finding the OGEC, or Oregon Government Ethics Commission, is more likely to listen to rules, to testimony that comes in, and maybe do something about it. So we were actually rather shocked when we turned in a bunch more evidence that our local commissioners had been doing things wrong, when the OGC said, well, you know, this might be worth looking into. Really? Great. So what we're going to start with tonight is, and because we've been telling you this over a period of nights, we're going to start with a audio recording. It's the best we can do. Yes, We're a video show. We're kind of like a little internet television station for you. And we post videos without commentary. You can watch them. This is what happened, actually happened. And sometimes we talk about things also. And we do that because when we first started with this, you'd be watching some kind of videotape. We give advice to the local TV stations. Well, they're actually in the next county. And one of the fellows was saying, well, what's actually happening here? See, you don't really know what's happening unless you know the players. And I said, well, that guy that's giving them testimony used to be with the big company that looks like it's trying to drive the smaller company out of business. Really? I said, now he's with the controlling authority. Oh, really? And then the lady that's talking to them, she put herself and her husband on the 911 board, and they're part of the decision-making process as well. But she's a commissioner. Uh-huh. Oh, she wouldn't know if you just watched the tape. So when they make decisions, they all generally are part of, I'm not making this up, all part of the same club. It's a private club. It's literally a club. And you're allowed in if you have certain investment in the community. And they talk to each other in this private club about what they're going to do next. And the public is completely out of it. That's not optimal. So what you'll hear on this recording from the OGEC is they're talking about violations of public meeting law. They're talking about we have been giving them warnings to the commissioners for quite a while. The commissioners are saying to this OGEC, well, we really didn't know what the rules are. You really knew because we told you and your legal counsel told you. And you just laughed at us. So you'll hear in this very first clip from the OGEC that the commissioners decided not to testify. That's important. They decided not to testify. And so, and they found, because it's never been necessary before, listen to what the OGEC has to say.
Are any of these folks present, either Ms. Walker, Mr. Hare, or Mr. Heck?
No, none of them are present, and
Very good.
they're all represented by the same attorney, Tracy McGovern from Frohnmeyer Deathridge, and she contacted me and said that neither she nor the respondents are going to appear today.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead and proceed. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just a logistical question. Don't we have a letter from a different attorney claiming to represent?
In another matter.
Oh, okay.
Not this matter.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so what's that about? Well, Mike knows what that's about. Tell him a little bit about Orhimco, Mike. And
Yeah,
that's what this letter is about.
I'm assuming that's what this letter is about because we don't know because they didn't say. You know, maybe there's a number of other complaints that are stacked up in addition to the ones we know about.
Trying. Yes, they've given up trying, basically, yes. And the commissioners have never needed to appear before. Why would they this time? Go ahead. Tell us about Orhimco.
Yeah, well, and I forget the exact time frame when this happened. It was during the spring where the commissioners they all signed a letter, and it was an emergency message to the legislature that they should intervene on behalf of Josephine County and block the passage of a law barring Southern Oregon counties from growing hemp in their county. And but what was not disclosed in that letter is that two of the commissioners are partners in the only hemp growing operation that's taking place in this county or in Southern Oregon that I know of. And so the suggestion there is that there's corruption in that they are acting for their own financial benefit, using their office to benefit financially.
Now, the unusual thing about this, again, we don't just report to news, we also comment on it because it's not doing any good for most people just to tell them, well, this happened. Yeah, well, what does that mean? Nobody's analyzing the news here at all, any place, and not reporting it a lot of the time also. So the unusual thing about this was that under matters from commissioners, which is a catch-all phrase, and you'll hear that in this recording also, where they can just talk about anything they want to. They're required by law to tell us what they're going to talk about, so maybe you'd like to show up and have something to say about it. They don't like to do that. matters from commissioners might as well be called, we're not going to tell you. And so under matters from commissioners, Simon Hare, one of the three commissioners, brought up an emergency matter that couldn't possibly be on the agenda because it was such an emergency, although it actually wasn't, that they're going to need to send an immediate letter right away, tomorrow or tonight if we can, to the Oregon legislature saying that, please, on behalf of all of Josephine County, we don't want this. Well, one, nobody could have commented on it because we didn't know it was coming up. Two, I mean, there might have been people for and against, but they didn't know it was going to happen. And Cheryl Walker also knew about it. They're the two partners. And so they wanted to sign this right away and get this out. Well, Keith Heck, the other commissioner, he didn't know anything about it. It was obvious from looking at him and from what he said. But they said, we need to send this right away. They decided right there to do this, and then they signed it out of presence of the public. Well, wait a minute. Josephine County is going to take a stand on something that none of us understand and know what's happening? Yes. So now you're going to hear a little bit more of this OGEC meeting. Keep in mind that these commissioners, they also call themselves commissioners. Sorry about the confusion. These commissioners, they thoroughly read everything before they go to the meeting. I've been to their meetings. Well, it's quite a trip, but they thoroughly read everything. They probably come to some kind of conclusion individually, which would be the only proper way to do that, before they get there. And when they're talking about sufficient evidence, and they're talking about preliminary findings, and all that's in the 100-page report you'll see me refer to in the video just a little bit later. And we have a copy of that 100-page report. And in there, from October 13th, they lay out the details from a complaint that was filed by Sandy Casanelli and another complaint that was filed by myself on behalf of badcounty.com, saying, look, this is what we think is happening in executive session, which is a very sensitive part of county meetings because there's no accountability. You don't know what they're talking about. They don't want to tell you what they're talking about in these executive sessions. And now they've started saying that, well, this is matters from commissioners while they're talking with their county lawyer. Wait a minute. You're supposed to tell us at least the topic, if not the details. They don't want to tell us the topic. Here's what the OGEC has to say.
Okay. Chair, Commissioners Cheryl Walker, Simon Hare, and Keith Heck were Josephine County Commissioners during the period relevant to this investigation. A preliminary review was conducted after a complaint was received alleging that the county commissioners may have violated the executive session provisions of the public meetings law. The commission found cause to investigate on May 1st of this year after considering information developed in the preliminary review. The focus of the investigation was to determine if there was sufficient evidence to indicate the commissioners participated in 5 executive sessions held in January and February of this year when topics not statutorily authorized for executive session were discussed. I've submitted the investigative reports to the commissioners with a recommendation to make preliminary findings of 3 violations of ORS 192-660 sub 2 for Commissioner Cheryl Walker and 4 violations of that same statute for Commissioners Hare and Heck.
Now, there would be many more of these. Mike and I have talked about why there were just the 5 sessions where they found this about 4 and this about 3. Mike, you want to explain why it was it's just this small group from the beginning of the year? We talked about that, if you recall.
Right. And there probably have been a number of other complaints filed against these commissioners since that time. But, as government wheels move slowly, it's taken them until October to process this situation.
That's right. That's right. So this is a little snapshot in time. It's only 5 meetings. And you're going to hear in the next clip, if you listen carefully, it's a little difficult to hear. I'm sorry, it's just audio because that's all that's available. You'll hear those commissioners chuckling about the idea of having matters from commissioners at all. when it relates to executive session. And again, it's because it's such a sensitive thing. Nobody's watching them. There's no controlling authority. They have complete ability to talk about anything they want to, but they're not supposed to. They're supposed to at least tell you the subject. And if they don't want to tell you the subject, they call it matters from commissioners. Listen to them kind of chuckling in the background. You'll see what I mean.
Questions? Motions?
Oh, I'm sorry,
good.
I forgot. I passed out a letter that came from the attorney, Ms. McGovern.
I think she was responding to
She was responding to
report.
the investigative report.
Does her answer change your recommendation?
No, she wanted the commissioners to know the last paragraph of her letter, or close to the last paragraph, that which was contained in her letter in your meeting book, that the commissioners of Josephine County have since discontinued using the topic matters from commissioners on their executive session agenda as kind of a catch-all generic
We don't
topic.
agree, but
So they
There's also a reference to the cable franchise.
Yes. Yes.
And does that change does her explanation of that particular point change your?
No, that was yeah. I spoke with Lynn Rossick about this statute too that she's referencing. And my understanding is that when a governing body goes into executive session under the lawful basis to consider a record exempt from public inspection, that they have to have the record there that they are going to examine or consider. And it sounds, she says that the record wasn't there. So
Now, what's that? The record doesn't bear. What they're saying is, well, we've got records that will prove that it's okay. But when the OGEC looked at it, it doesn't prove that.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting about these charges is there's very little they could do to mitigate this situation. It either exists that they went into executive session under, false pretenses, or they didn't. Either they went in with this particular designation that is improper, or they didn't, and it's clear that they did. So how you can get out of that, as several of these commissioners are saying, no, we didn't do anything wrong. I don't know how they're going to back off of that, because it's either a yes or a no, a yay or a nay, and it appears to be a yay.
Well, the other part about this too is anyone can say, well, maybe they're so brand new they don't know, or perhaps they're just getting bad advice, or maybe they don't know what the law is. The only problem with that premise is we've been telling them what the law is, badcounty.com does. Other people have been telling them. There's a group of citizens that they laugh at. They've been saying, you can't meet under that kind of circumstance. It's not okay to meet matters from commission.
Yeah, not only that, they've all been in almost a full term, and one of them's been in, part of 2 terms.
That's right. 5 years.
If they don't know, if they don't know the rules by now, then, that's an issue. I guess they have to have some sort of a class for these people as they're coming in.
Now, what we've done is we've actually gone to long meetings where we've laid out a presentation. We have given them copies of the state rules. We've talked to them ad nauseum, and I mean ad nauseum, about what the rules are. And the results that we've gotten is one of the commissioners, Simon Harris, says, why don't you take it to the state? I mean, laugh in our face. And the other one, and not just mine and yours, but anybody that brings this up, he said, these gnats in the room that are talking about open public meeting laws, that's just, and our state representative, the guy that owns the radio station, he was laughing right along with him. He just thought it was hilarious. These are the fellows that don't want to listen to the tape. We offered them this tape to listen to. They don't want to listen to this tape. This proves something. They're not interested in listening to this. This is not part of their club meeting where they decide things. You know, when they had a call-in show at the local radio station, and I called in and I asked some questions about this kind of thing. The fellow's now the state representative, owns the radio station. He banned me for life from calling in to that radio station during their news discussion time for asking a question about his club. It's a private club, and they meet and talk about county business illegally with a county quorum. And they don't want to talk about it, and they don't want anybody talking about it. That's the case. So we do have some journalists in the greater area of Southern Oregon that have said, that's terrible. Well, what did you do about that? And I said, well, I told the state. Well, what did they do? They did nothing. They weren't interested. That's what was so unusual about this meeting. Maybe once again, it is this thing that happened with the governor, and now they feel under scrutiny. And well, I guess we better look at this. Well, I guess you better. But it's not the first time. So you're going to hear, you're really in trouble when an ethics commission is using the word guise, not G-U-Y-S, G-U-I-S-E, that you're meeting in this under the guise of doing something else. Listen to what they say here.
Well, yeah, no, I think that kind of covers it. It's kind of like when people go into executive session to confer with counsel about litigation, but they don't have any counsel. You know, we don't consider that to be fully compliant with what the requirements are of the provision.
Would it matter if they had the documented another meeting and simply remembered its content?
Well, that's one of the interesting things about this case is that they have this sort of tendency to hold executive sessions and use as the purpose of the executive session sort of long ago pieces of advice, as though that kind of was the base, and then they could sort of build on that discussion. And I think it's similar to using the agenda item of matters from commissioners, that there was kind of a loose connection with the requirements of the executive session provisions for how they conducted executive sessions. They appeared to do them every single week, and they would continue to use, for example, a very old piece of legal advice as the guise for continuing to talk about something over and over again. And I think when Diane and I discussed it, we did not feel that met the requirements of the executive session provisions. If they want to talk about advice from legal counsel, then it needs to be on point for what the discussion is.
Gotcha.
She certainly put that diplomatically.
Yes. You know what's interesting is this took place back in January and February. So haven't they been using this method, shall we say, up until very, very recently?
Yes.
So theoretically speaking, there could be, if this board of commissioners of the ethics commission desired to look deeper into this, they could probably stack a whole, a whole nother passel of violations on top of this one if they cared to do so.
They probably could, but they're really loath to find government officials in the state of Oregon, this ethics commission, guilty of anything. They just don't like to do that. They made that very clear to us several times, like, you really don't need to file anymore because we're very unlikely to. I mean, why don't you just tell the commissioners what the rules are? We have been, and they just laugh. Well, why don't you write something about it? We have been. Well, why don't you elect new commissioners?
Yeah, but part of the reason why they laugh is because the ethics commission doesn't do anything. If every time they did something, they heard back from the ethics commission because of a complaint of a local citizen here, they might pull back on that sort of behavior. But since, and the signal is clearly coming from upstairs, hey, we don't want to get too deep into this thing here. Do what you need to do. And, if it gets too out of line, we'll send you a note and tell you to get back in the box. So, who knows? I'm very interested to see what happens going forward.
Well, one of the things that we do is, yes, we report the news. And yes, we videotape things and we put them up without comment for you to see the exact wording of what county officials have said. And then you make up your own mind. Gee, that doesn't sound right. Or, gee, I love that. The other thing that we do is we all, as citizens, we pay for the video that's set up, the cameras that are set up at the weekly business session. So they know and we know that part of our show here, part of our news outreach, which we do for free, and we give all of the details to the media and then try to say, look, other media, and say, would you like to read this? No, thanks. But we try to use that as a way to also tell another group of people, those with cable TV, less and less these days here, what's actually happening. So you'll see me stand up in a little speech later to try to tell people for the very first time what's happening, because nobody else is going to tell them. They're not going to say anything about it. And when I'd stand up in the past and say to the commissioners, you can't just say we're going to have a general discussion about something where you're required by law to be specific. That's not okay. And Simon Hare, as I mentioned to you, would just laugh and say, well, why don't you take that to the Oregon Government Ethics Commission? Ha ha. So we know you can't take it to the OGEC because they're not going to do anything. Now suddenly, they're actually saying things like, well, it's got a loose connection to the law. You think? Yes, it definitely does have a loose connection to the law. It's a nice way of putting it. Mm-hmm. So now you're going to hear the commissioners, the OGEC commissioners, they're going to take a vote, and you're going to hear how it comes out. Keep in mind that after this vote, I called on behalf of Bad County and talked to the lead investigator. And I said, does this mean, tell me in everyday English, please, because we don't want to say the wrong word, does it mean that you found our commissioners here guilty? Yes. I said, okay, no, let me say it again. I usually do this 3 times. We can use the word guilty and we're not going to be wrong. You didn't find them of not fully complying with some kind of, are they guilty of not obeying the law? Yes, guilty. And I said, okay, pardon me, please be patient with me. I'm going to ask you one more time. If we say the word guilty, is that the right word? Yes. Well, Sandy Casanelli did that independently. They said yes to her. The editor that we shared for free with our details and our research of the Daily Courier, the newspaper here, he called them and they said, yes, guilty is the right word. Well, then keep that in mind when you hear them take this vote.
Motion to approve staff recommendations in matters 14, 15, and 16.
Thank you, Commissioner Golden. Virginia.
Commissioner Colbert. Aye. Commissioner Golden.
Aye.
Commissioner Hooper.
Aye.
Commissioner Tomlin.
Aye.
Chair Montoya.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
I think it passed.
Yeah. Okay, an interesting new trend that's happened, because we look at trends too and patterns. Something new that's happened I've never ever seen before any place, not in 15 years I've lived here. Now what's happening is now when we videotape something and we've got proof on high definition video, now we have various members of the government, all 3 county commissioners, they're saying that's not on the tape. Now, are you saying we're misinterpreting it? No, because I've said that before. No, we're not saying that. Are you saying that it's out of context? No, I'm not saying it's out of context. Well, what are you saying? We're saying it's not on the tape. It's not. It is absolutely on the tape. No, it's not. There's nothing on that tape. Nothing. I just don't think that's sustainable, Mike.
Well, yeah, especially if you can produce the video.
Which we do, and we put it out there, and we know that they're watching it because they're quoting from it, but they're quoting and saying, but that's not what we said. We're misinterpreting what you're saying. Let me make sure you understand this. We're misinterpreting. No. It's out of context. No. It didn't happen. It's just not on the tape. It's not there. So you'll hear, after you heard this vote, and we've got independent confirmation from 3 people that didn't even talk to each other. I didn't know anyone else was going to call and ask that question. I asked 3 times. Okay. They said This means guilty. Now, when the official letter comes out, it's going to say, well, we found that your level of sunshine and transparency is not at its optimum. Whatever. What does that mean? It means they're guilty. Now, in order for them to appeal, they have to be found something. They can't appeal something that says, well, we found you, we're not sure. Well, you can't appeal that. So what they found, let's be fair, what they found was they're guilty. And now the commissioners, using this outside lawyer that we're paying for, okay, now they can say, well, we want to appeal that guilty decision, that guilty verdict. I don't know if verdict's the right word, but I use guilty because that's what they said to do 3 times. Yes, that's correct. So now they can appeal that, which they will. Of course they will. Who wouldn't? And then there's the penalty phase. What's the penalty going to be? Well, we're anticipating it's going to be basically nothing. Well, we'll send you a letter explaining the law, as if they don't already know. They said they already know the law. They just don't care. So here's my speech. It's a little uncomfortable, but every once in a while, in order to break through, because what are you going to put it in the newspaper? You're going to be on the radio station, the TV station? It's not going to be there, generally speaking. So I got up at a weekly business session and I said, well, here's the documents and here's what was said. Go ahead, Mike.
Dale Matthews, Grants Pass. I have in my hand a 100-page document from the state of Oregon, the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. It's signed by the Assistant Attorney General of the state of Oregon. All 3 commissioners have been found guilty as of Friday of violating the Open Public Meetings Law. This was a long time coming from the state because they don't like to find anybody guilty of anything.
Pick the microphone up a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. They just don't like to do that, but the evidence was piling up so fast that they just couldn't ignore it anymore. Now in this, Keith Heck says, well, paraphrasing, I'm really not quite sure that I understand what the laws are, except of course that we've told him. And he said in this room 3 times, I know we're breaking the law and I don't care. That statement by me to the OGEC made a big difference in their finding that this idea that the 3 of you don't know what the law is, you admitted you do know what the law is, but you don't care. So what are the results of this? Well, after talking with the state, they've told me a couple of times, they said, look, we're going to expend the time and effort to look into this and find them guilty with subpoenas of your records, with testimony offered by you through your lawyers, not through Wally Hicks, through your lawyers. After all that effort, subpoenas and the rest of it, what are we going to do about it? Because they can follow through, and they did, finally. But what they said to me is, if you keep electing these kinds of people, we can't do anything for you. Well, I agree. If I was the state and the regulators, I would say, we're not going to do anything more for you if you just keep putting yourself back in the same hot water, you citizens of Josephine County. Why would they do anything ever again? So you're going to say, well, this is nothing. This is just a mountain out of a molehill. It's still under investigation. No, it's not. It's over. You're guilty. They found you so. So certainly some say, well, really, what does guilt mean in this world of ours? We all know. You've been found guilty. Now they're going to charge you $1.95 and give you a slap on the wrist and maybe a copy of the rules because you don't know what they are. Yes, you do. So the end result is we're going to have to move forward without you. We're going to have to consider you as part of the past. We're just going to come up with solutions of our own. And this is me turning my back on the past.
Our editorials are so dramatic. Well, it gets people's attention, and we need to wake them up out of their lethargy. They're used to things for 2 generations or more. It's been like this. And it just, well, yeah, they're all part of the same club, but I guess that club has our best interest in mind. Literally a club. So That's the bit that I said. Now, of course, we already know, and I already said, they're going to say you're making a mountain out of a molehill. It's still under investigation. Nothing's done. We weren't really found guilty. Of course, they're going to say all those things. We already knew that, which is why we future-proofed ourselves by asking the commission, the other commission, ahead of time, what are the words that we can use? And I already said to you that the upshot of this is they've been found guilty. Now they get a chance to appeal and say, well, we didn't know any better. I'm not sure that's going to work, but they can try that. And you heard the commissioners, you heard them kind of chuckling about this thing about matters from commissioners. We told these commissioners here specifically, you cannot just put some overall, we're not going to tell you kind of phrase, because you have to tell us it's state law. You're required to tell us. Well, until now, nobody was even paying attention to that or cared. Now suddenly the OGEC says, well, OG, maybe we ought to EC this.
Hey, you mentioned earlier about the attorneys being paid for at our cost. Did you get some sort of verification of that fact from the county that they're paying for outside attorneys for these people?
The only clue that we have, which brings up a real good question, how do we get any of this information? If it's executive session, how do we get it? Okay. The only clue that we have is that Keith Heck, one of the commissioners, told the Daily Courier, the newspaper here, the newspaper, is kind of sad, that it cost the county so far $5,000 to defend against this. How's it costing the county anything? Why would it cost the county anything if these fellows have been accused of disobeying the law? So I don't know for sure. Nice catch, Mike. I don't know for sure if that went directly to attorneys, but my guess is that part of it went to paying the cost of the secretaries in the office, or maybe the secretaries over in the legal counsel's office, to prepare some materials for submission to the OGEC. They also said that Cheryl Walker said that there was video involved. Video? How's there video involved with an executive session where no video is allowed? What video? I've asked a question about that. I put in a request today with the office there. We call it Freedom of Information Act, but they call it information blockage. No, what do they call it? A request for information. And I said, I'd like a detailed assessment of how that money was spent. Whose money was it? Who did what? What's their hourly rate? What's the justification for having a county worker work on this? What's up with that? Follow the money. Okay, now we're going to give Cheryl Walker a chance to say, first it's a little bit from Cheryl Walker and then a little bit from Simon Hare, absolutely nothing from the chairman of the board, who's Keith Heck. And they'll explain why I'm just totally incorrect in all ways. Go ahead.
As Mr. Matthews is not my attorney, he's not the attorney for the county, he's not an attorney at all. I think the jury is still out on that. So.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes.
I'm done.
Okay. As a matter of fact, I checked into it yesterday. There was an ethics commission panel convened on Friday, and they had a report from one of their inside investigators who recommended that they go forward with a continued investigation and a potential contested case hearing. No one has been declared guilty of anything. No one has interviewed me. I don't know about the other two, but no one's interviewed me from the Ethics Commission, so the investigation is still underway. Obviously, with his lack of legal knowledge, Dale Matthews doesn't know how to differentiate between a continuing investigation and potential contested case hearing and a determination of innocence or guilt. So for his proclamations, I think he's up here posturing at this podium so that he can post something on his website to show what an involved citizen that he is, in fact, with false, misleading, and absolutely untrue information. The parties here who are involved, and I can't speak for the other two, but for myself, I am definitely involved in this. And as to subpoenaing information, we have provided every bit of information that has ever been asked for. Minutes of meetings, videotapes, everything they've asked for. And so the investigation is continuing. There has been no determination of guilt on the part of anyone. The other situation.
Good point to reinforce that, if you may, if I might, Ms. Commissioner Walker, is that there isn't any, ramifications. If we were guilty, there would be something as far as sanctions are concerned, and that hasn't been determined, I think, by Mr. Matthews' own testimony. And so, without that, it's pretty evident that there is not a guilty verdict in this,
No.
or innocent. It's just a
If there was any
continuation.
violation, and it's not a guilty as far as a crime, and if there were any violation, there are negotiated type things of whether it's a sanction, whether it's a monetary or a letter, but we aren't even to that point. As I said, no one from the state has interviewed us. We've not had any opportunity for a hearing as yet. I understand that that may be the next step. So anyway, his protestations about being any member of this board being proclaimed guilty of anything are absolutely false.
Well,
Absolutely false.
yes.
They were not interviewed. You know why they're not interviewed? Because we already told you, because they did not want to show up.
Right, and they were represented by an attorney who is basically either shows up in your stead or submits information in your stead, and that's what happened in this particular case. So they have been heard.
Right.
They have answered the charges.
Right. And she said, well, this is a continuing investigation. The only thing that's continuing is, what's the penalty going to be? If they'll give them a chance to appeal. This time they're probably going to go. Somebody's going to go. And that'll be in probably at the next meeting, which won't be till December. Okay. So certainly they're going to go there. I mean, think about it a little bit. What are they going to say? We didn't understand what the rules were. We're totally innocent. We always do everything correctly. And so what's the problem? Now, the fact that that other commission was chuckling at their explanation is not going to help them very much. And the fact that Keith Eka said, I know we're breaking the law. He wasn't confused. He's the one that didn't say anything. I know we're breaking the law, and I don't care. So it's going to be hard to maintain this attitude of I don't care and I know we're breaking the law, and then convince the Oregon Government Ethics Commission that you didn't know and that you really do care. How's that going to work for them? We did supply videotape. I can't imagine what videotape they could possibly supply. Saying what? It won't be of an executive session. So how did we find this out? Mike and I have talked a lot about the details of. So tell us what you think that we did based on the discussions we've had about this, Mike. Why don't you fill people in about how did we get this information? Because it turns out, bang, it's straight on. How do we do that?
Well, if I'm correct about this, Sandy Casanelli informed us that she had correspondence from the ethics board, and she forwarded that to us, and then we followed up on it.
Right. And the way that she found the initial information, the way that I found the initial information, we were operating separately, is that there were these very obscure references to executive session, which they're required by law to tell you what they're talking about. So if they're going to, if the topic is called how embarrassing it is to answer questions from the public, that is not supposed to be on executive session. So that would be the title of a couple of these things that they caught them about. So instead they say matters from commissioners, because they can't put down, we don't want to talk about this in public. That's not okay. And so we kept finding these odd references. Whenever you find something, you go, that's really strange. Look into that. Or those numbers don't add up. Look into that. Follow the money. We've been doing that on a couple of things as well. Well, no wonder we're not their favorite people, because we've been following up on this stuff. Nobody else is doing it, right? And so a lot of citizens are, oh, thank you so much for following up on this. Well, it just seems natural to me, but apparently it's not. Not in our area. So we kept paying attention to the little bits and pieces that we could see. Look, I'm going to use an analogy. Not everyone's fond of analogies, but astronomers are finding that there seem to be planets rotating around stars out there that we can just barely see. planets? If you can barely see the star, how are you going to see the planets? Well, what they do is they blow up as big as they can, the picture of the planet that they have, and they use X-ray telescopes and that kind of stuff. And the thing looks probably about the size of this disc back here, but it's all blurry, and it's just a blurry white blob. Well, but then they've got these instruments that can detect just how much that's varying back and forth, like this much. It's not very much.
Yeah, it's a wobble.
A wobble. And so they figure, based on this periodic wobble, remember the periodic table of elements? Well, this is a periodic wobble. From this periodic wobble,
yes, not the
that has to be planets of various sizes. Well, maybe big rocks, but probably
right. Yeah.
to make a whole star.
Well, if you could imagine. Yes, if you could imagine that the star has a string on it and the string has a planet at the end of it. Well, physics, when the thing is pulling it around, is going to wobble a little bit. And that's essentially, the forces that are in play in every galaxy and every, system, solar system like we have here. And all of these bodies, have a connection to the sun, which they're in orbit around, and that's what they're looking at. They're looking at this little planet out here is pulling on that just a little teeny bit and making it move just a little, and so then they can determine that there's a planetary system.
I was interested in two subjects. I couldn't quite make up my mind at that age, and so I was interested in physics and I was interested in journalism. Well, it turned into kind of a double major. It's a very strange double major. But now I'm hoping, as you can see from the analogy, what I can do is take something somewhat complex and explain it in everyday English. That would be nice. Okay, so that's all that we did. We just had to sit outside. We weren't recording what was happening behind the door. That would be wrong. It would be illegal. It's just wrong. And so, but we'd look through the records and we go, now that's really odd. Now, what's this all about? And we started compiling this. Sandy did it completely on her own. I did it completely on my own. We were coming up with the same observations. There seems to be a wobble. What's that wobble about? Well, it looks like we were right. That's what we do. Pattern recognition, analysis of the data, even when they're trying so desperately to keep it quiet and don't allow any light into that chamber. Well, now there's suddenly sunlight streaming in there and they're saying, well, you're not a lawyer. Fortunately, we don't have to be lawyers. Okay, so we could go back and parse what Cheryl Walker said sentence by sentence, but I think you get the general gist of what they're saying. This is nothing. Now, don't forget now, we're going to tell you what it said in the Daily Courier. We went over, I sat down for an hour with the reporter, the new reporter at the Daily Courier, so maybe we can expect more things. Maybe. And I explained the background to all this because he doesn't know, he's new, and what led into this and why we do this and our motivation. He asked about that and then gave him all the documents for free. That's what we do. We're non-commercial. We just want to get the news out because nobody's doing that. So this guy actually was able to convince his editors, this was a big surprise, to put an article in the Daily Courier. And we're going to read at least selected parts of it from you, and then we're going to say goodnight. Okay, so Mike, why don't you kick it off?
Okay, here. And there is the picture of the front page. And it starts out, commissioners violated open meetings law, ethics board says, by Editor Campisano of the Daily Courier. The Josephine County Board of Commissioners violated Oregon's public meeting law by holding closed-door sessions without proper justification, according to a ruling by the State Ethics Commission.
The Oregon Government Ethics Commission made the ruling after investigating a complaint. Well, there were two complaints, but whatever. After filed in January by former County Commissioner Sandy Casanelli and by badcounty.com.
The Ethics Commission ruled that Commissioners Keith Heck, Cheryl Walker, and Simon Hare violated state law when they discussed general county policies during 3 closed-door hearings that month and again in February. Walker was absent during the February meeting.
The commissioners now have two choices: appeal the findings and trigger a hearing, or negotiate a settlement. The ethics board sent a letter to each commissioner, which Walker and Heck say they have not yet received.
Reached by phone on Wednesday, Walker maintained that neither she nor her fellow county commissioners did anything wrong.
Quote, I am very familiar with public meeting laws, she said. That's why I'm absolutely incredulous. I haven't done anything, in my view, against the law.
Heck also says the county commissioners haven't done anything wrong. He says the biggest concern is about the attention and county money the proceedings are costing.
The bottom line is that, I've lost part of the story here. I got to zoom out a little bit. Sorry. I'm trying to read this thing. The bottom line is the mountain. Does this sound familiar? The bottom line is the mountain that has been built by some folks is basically turning out to be a molehill. You know, I think he has that trend backwards, Mike, Heck said. And the citizens need to understand that this hunt that is on, in this particular case, has cost at least over $5,000 of taxpayer money.
At least over. That's playing a trip on my head here.
Yeah, and that's why I put in the request for information. How has it cost the taxpayers anything?
Yes. Ethics Commission Executive Director Ron Burson says officials usually opt to settle by paying a fine and participating in training related to the violation. The maximum fine in this case is $1,000, although the Oregonian newspaper this year found that the median fee negotiated by state public officials is $75. Wow.
Boy, that's going to bust
That's
them.
a penalty.
Okay, this is the editorial phase.
Yes.
we can talk about it. The Ethics Commission, the Ethics Commission, even by Burson's admission, is lenient with people it believes aren't willfully breaking the law.
You've got to remember that there are about 1,700 jurisdictions in the state of Oregon, he said. The people that are on those are usually people who aren't well versed in those statutes.
Well, of course, but they said that they are well versed in those statutes.
Yeah, that's
specifically.
That's what Cheryl Walker said at the beginning of this article.
Right, and that's exactly what Keith Heck said. I know we're breaking the law, and I don't care. Under Oregon law, all public bodies, such as the Board of Commissioners, are required to hold meetings in public if there's a need to discuss legally sensitive information, lawsuits, employee discipline, etc. A meeting may be temporarily closed. This is called an executive session. And what he doesn't say in here is you have to say the topic. You don't need to say the name of the employee, but you have to say the topic so that we'll know that you're not breaking the law.
Although these discussions are closed to the public, and news media, it doesn't say
close to the public. News media may attend.
May attend, but can't report directly on the proceedings. The Daily Courier sends reporters to some executive sessions, but not the particular ones described in the investigation.
I'm not surprised, Mike, that they didn't send those to particular ones because they haven't been coming to most of these things. Yeah. We were coming for 6 months because we were recognized as media. Then when Simon Hare came in, 300,000 views on our site now make sure that we're not media of any kind. What? Yes. So now we couldn't report on what's happening, but we're supposed to. Our job is to say, you're veering off topic. That doesn't happen very often, but it does, obviously, every once in a while. And our job would be, I think it should be the requirement for admission if you're going to be in the media. Your job would be to make sure they don't lose track of the right things to do. But they don't want us there. And now they've suddenly declared that we're not media. Really? Go ahead, Mike.
Okay. The public meetings law in Oregon is about open, transparent meetings, Burson said. To operate inside of executive sessions, there are very narrow exceptions carved out in the law.
All three county commissioners were present during executive sessions on January 7, 14, and 21. They discussed employment practices at the sheriff's office, the county's vehicle use policy, and public records policy.
The Ethics Commission concluded that the discussions centered on a particular employee's violation of a given policy. They would have qualified for the closed-door executive session. But because county commissioners discussed the county policy in general, the discussion should have taken place in public.
Now, that seems fairly technical. I'm more interested in the fact that they were talking about public records policy in a private meeting.
Yeah,
Why
it's a
would
little
they
ironic.
do that? When commissioners discussed the vehicle use policy on January 14, for example, they only addressed passages in the Fleet Safety Handbook. Why is that an executive session? Itself a public document. Likewise, the January 7 executive session explored, I got to be able to read this, hiring and firing practices at the sheriff's office. Because neither meeting addressed a specific employee, they didn't meet the prerequisites for an executive session, the Ethics Commission concluded.
Hare, Walker, and Heck violated the law again January 21st when they discussed the county's policy on public records during an executive session.
And on February 4, Walker was absent during an executive session where Hare and Heck discussed a proposed franchise agreement with Charter Communications during a closed meeting. This is very important. The folks at Charter Cable said, you know, we've had a kind of a reorganization here, and we can see that the way that you've been spending the money on public access, this is public education and government. We're supposed to have a channel for people to talk about local high school sports if that's what they want to, or a show like this. We're supposed to have that. We pay for it. The commissioners don't like it. And so they'd prefer that that kind of thing is not possible, and that only government was using that money that's supposed to be for public education and government. So Charter Cable said, look, you're not obeying the law. Sound familiar? And so we'd like you to start obeying the law, or we really don't want to supply you with these things. Well, Simon Hare especially and Cheryl Walker were really angry about this. It's none of your business what we do, and apparently not the public's business either. And so this is a very embarrassing subject. They did not want to talk about this in public where they could rail against the system in private, which is what they did. We've heard them do it in other meetings too. This is just the part where this was what they were saying was so sensitive that they didn't want anybody to hear it. So you want to skip down to their denials?
Well, I don't know where that is. I'm just continuing on.
Okay, you go right ahead.
We're at here.
Right.
The two commissioners explored the county's rights and responsibilities in case the contract opened the county up to a lawsuit. Because there was no pending litigation to discuss, nor did investigators conclude it was likely there would be, the Ethics Commission concluded the discussion wasn't covered under executive session statutes.
Casanelli, who served part of a term on the Board of Commissioners before she was recalled, December 2011, they always have to mention that, said she filed the complaint when she noticed the term matters from commissioners on the agenda for the executive session on January 7th. Now, we did it too, Bad County, but they really don't like to talk about Bad County in the Courier. Go ahead.
They were using it as a catch-all to talk behind the public's back, she said. That particular item disappeared from the agenda in May when a preliminary report from the Ethics Commission advised the Josephine County Board that it was misleading. Matters from commissioners could insinuate that any topic Heck, Hare, and Walker plan to discuss during executive sessions was okay.
Walker contends that because she, Hare, and Heck conducted the closed-door conversations on the advice of County Legal Counsel Wally Hicks, we'll explain why they would say that, and that he was in the room during these discussions, they're exempt from accusations of wrongdoing. That's not the reason. It's very clear. If they can prove that legal counsel was giving them advice that, hey, this is okay, although he's on the record as saying it's not okay, then they escape the monetary penalty phase.
Yeah, the $75. Oh, that's that would be rough. Yeah, and I wonder how much money they're going to spend trying to get out of paying $75. Anyway,
Burson, however.
Yes, Burson, however, said it's a misconception that acting on the advice of legal counsel is a shield from the provisions of open public meetings law. Misconceptions like that are why the Ethics Commission pushes for training instead of stiffer penalties, he added. Hare could not be reached for comment at the time of the publication. Sorry, short sentence. I thought I'd wipe it out.
That's fine. Wipe it out. So, so generally what they're saying now to anyone that will listen is that they didn't know what they were doing. Oh, no, we were following advice of legal counsel. No, we didn't do anything wrong at all. And anyone that would insinuate that we had done something wrong is just completely wrong. It's misleading to even suggest that we were doing anything wrong. Why? How could anyone say that?
Well, this apparently, I mean, Walker says in the beginning of the article that she's very well versed on public meeting law and that she's an expert on these sort of things. She doesn't need to be told anything. And at the end of it, she says, well, you know, we were just doing what this guy told us to do. And so we're not guilty of anything. You can't have both of those.
They do it all the time.